Welcome to America Uncanceled. What was once disregarded as conspiracy theory is now reality. Elon Musk's recent release of the Twitter files exposed how big tech actively censored information on behalf of the FBI and Trump's political opponents leading up to the 2020 election. With big tech, Democrats, and the swamp all working together to flip elections in their favor, what can Republicans do to even the playing field? It's our great honor to have with us Kat Cammack, a great, relatively young congresswoman from the state of Florida. I guess my first question, I always find it interesting. Are you congresswoman or are you congressman?
Well, first, Matt, you're killing me. Relatively young? Come on.
I mean, relatively new at this job. You know what I'm trying to say. Which I consider to be a huge compliment. I mean, you're not one of these people that have to kind of help sit down in their chair and give them all the questions to ask. You know what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. So yeah, new to the job, but I'm only 34, still the youngest Republican woman in Congress today. But man, I'm gonna have to tease you about that for a while. You're never supposed to ask a woman about her age.
Well, I always thought that was women who were older.
I don't know, but no, it's really an interesting time where we are facing so many interesting issues and really important issues that I think a millennial, and I kind of see myself as one of the token millennials in Congress, we're in a really good place to have leadership of our generation at the table. And as far as being a congresswoman versus a congressman, I'm the best damn person for the job, so I don't really care what you call me.
I love it. Let's not get stuck up on pronouns and all that stuff, right? Let's just get the job done. So let's jump right into the first area that's really bothering people, been bothering people for a long time. And that is this autocratic power of big tech. We have lots of companies. It's not just Twitter. It's the $417 million spent by Facebook to try to change the outcome of an election. It's Microsoft, it's Apple, it's all the big guys. What are you doing to make conservatives feel like there'll be some justice on these sets of questions?
Well, I think that's why the commitment to America is so powerful, because one of the main pillars that we're focused on is big tech. And it's a variety of things. It's not just Section 230 reform to try to remove the bias and establish some sense of fairness in that space, but it's also protecting our data, our privacy, our kids who are exposed to so much, especially on platforms like TikTok, which even Biden's administration is now saying, oh my gosh, red flags galore. We need to remove TikTok from people's devices. This is a problem. So it's much more than just Section 230 reform and removing that bias, but it's things like going after the cartels that are actively advertising on social media platforms like Facebook, and they are facilitating, they being the metas of the world, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, they're facilitating the trafficking of narcotics and humans, and they're taking money from the cartels to do it. Then you factor in the geofencing that takes place, where they do these targeted ads to people around the world saying, we can get you across the border into the United States and here's our price. And then they're using the infrastructure of social media to facilitate the payments. So there's a litany of different things going on. And as far as the censorship issues, I think we have to go after the heart of it, which is, one, the people behind the scenes, like the trust and safety teams, so-called, that are at Twitter, that are deplatforming people with no good cause. And, of course, the algorithms that are designed to inherently censor and suppress conservative voices. So there's a lot that we have to dig into here, but it's going to be multiple steps for us to get back to a place where there's some sense of balance on social media platforms.
Yeah, totally agree. So there's all these separate issues here. The first question is obviously censoring conservatives, as we've seen Facebook and now Twitter with this set of revelations that have come out from its new CEO, Elon Musk. That's just, there's no way that should be able to exist. Now, the First Amendment applies to the government, not private companies. So private companies are allowed to make these decisions about who they want to highlight and who they don't want to highlight or shadow ban. But You're not allowed to commit a fraud on the American people by saying, hey, my company is welcome to all points of view and we welcome all conversations. Remember, Twitter went to CPAC to get all of us to sign on because it said this is a safe space for conservatives. Turned out to be a lie.
Exactly. Well, and think about this. When you look at, say, like the national broadcasters and, you have to place advertisements or you want to place advertisements on local television or national television, there's still a set of standards that you have to abide by. And when it gets into political season, and Matt, you know this better than anybody, they have, equal time coverage that they are supposed to abide by. But I've gone out the window a little bit here in recent years. But there's some framework that is guiding this. Tech has been really left in the dust because there really hasn't been anyone in government who understands it. As someone who was born in 1988, I think I have the benefit of being a little bit analog, but also digital, growing up in the space and understanding the evolution of it and where it's going. Because we also, of course, have the metaverse to contend with, and there's a whole litany of issues in the metaverse that I think people aren't really expecting. So as far as really dealing with the framework, to your point, a private company absolutely needs its rights respected, but when you step into the public square and conduct yourself as such, you have to then at that point recognize that the First Amendment is non-negotiable.
That's right.
So those community standards need to reflect
Also,
that.
Corporations have to follow the law where it comes to their use of corporate money, and these corporate entities, when they've turned into political entities and trying to be electioneering arms of the Democratic Party, I really think you and your colleagues have some real legitimate questions to ask. The second question is too big, right? Too big, too small, cut them up, do what we did with AT&T, make them smaller. Do you believe that'll solve any problems, or we just have more smaller companies committing the same, policy violations?
I definitely think that there is a valid antitrust argument to be made. That being said, what we've seen, and this is a great example with Snapchat. Snapchat came up, it got real big, and then it kind of fell off into a certain niche. But the issues within Snapchat still exist, much in the same way when they were at the bigger levels. So I think that we have to address some of the root causes. A great example with Google is the algorithm that they use when it comes to the pro-life community. When pro-life community puts out advertisements and does Google AdWords, what happens is that the algorithm is designed to suppress that. And so we need to actually get into that and say, if you're going to be accepting dollars for advertising, then you have to adhere by a certain set of standards. And that is, I think, incredibly important, no matter how big or how small. So whether you're a tiny startup that is in the new social media connectivity app space, or if you're a giant like Google, there needs to be some sort of framework. And I am all for pulling back on the regulatory environment, but we're in an age where this is now the main primary means of communication, way people disseminate information. So there's some considerations that have to be made. And another thing that we haven't even really touched on is that there's only two main platforms in which these apps can really be hosted on. You have the Apple Store or you have Android, right? And you see a real discrepancy. Facebook, for example, they pay $1 to have Facebook on their store. You compare that to another app, for example, that pays 30% of their gross profits, and that's what goes to Apple. It's a completely backwards model, and there has to be some framework put in place so that everyone can have a shot at accessing that market.
So on the Apple phone, are you saying that what it really should be is a fair place for all people to play, instead of Apple being able to cherry pick which apps can take off and can't? It seems like Apple has a lot of power there.
Yeah, I know. It's a novel concept of a free and open market. Competition is encouraged and help facilitated, but it's kind of crazy that in today's world, really, you only have the option of a Google device, of an Android device, or of an Apple device. And if you can only really get your apps through those two stores, and they're choosing which companies they're going to put on the store and which ones they're not, with no real clear set of rules or guidelines of what happens when you get on there and how you can be deplatformed, that's pretty crazy. I mean, I think Parler's a great example of that.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that we're spending a lot of time talking about Twitter. God bless Elon Musk. I call him the ultimate whistleblower. But what you just said is we have some big companies, you've mentioned two of them, Apple and Google, that are really setting the pace on so many things that also need a lot of focus. They try to hide sometimes. And part of this is this woke corporate culture where once an Apple and a Google says some new kind of perversion in society should be accepted by all companies and funded by all companies, it seems to like go through the whole process of the BRT and the chamber. What can we do to make all that stop?
I think that the culture war is just as important as the legislative battles that we have ahead. And you've heard me say this before, Matt. We are not going to legislate our way out of this mess. We as consumers have to assert our right, not just at the ballot box, but with our dollars. And really, when we buy into these corporations that are promoting these ESG guidelines, right, where the social justice warriors of the world are saying all of the companies that feed into this one corporation or product have to abide by a certain set of guidelines and standards, even some of them that are made up completely, that is very dangerous because it's not just for tangible products, but that's also for the digital space. So I think we are really, really entering an era where we, the people, have a tremendous amount of power. We just have to help people seize that power and understand how they can leverage their vote and their dollar and their voice in a way to actually win the culture war. Because even though there's going to be 222 of us conservatives up here fighting the good fight, there's not a single silver bullet in a legislative form that's going to fix this. We have to stand up and push back from the ground up.
Yeah, for sure. I hear sirens going off in the back. Those are the famous congressional beeps letting you know. That kind of dictates your life, doesn't it? By the way, we'll get to control those beeps pretty soon, right, Congresswoman?
Absolutely. Come January 3rd, it's a whole new world.
Let me ask you one final question as we let you go off to vote. The border, we're seeing now a second year of multi-millions of people, coming across the border illegally. I'm from a relatively small state of Kansas. We've essentially let in another state just from the illegals who have been able to come in across the southern border. Is there any hope that as we negotiate a budget deal going into next year with Republicans in charge at the House, that we can close that border and get Biden to back down?
Yeah, there's no option. We have to. There is no deal on the table that I could support that didn't have a standalone border security, secure the border, shut it down, give the resources to our Border Patrol agents option. Right now, we've heard about a deal potentially being crafted in the Senate that would tie border security to amnesty. That is a non-starter. That is dead on arrival in a Republican House. And so people should take note that this should not be an item for negotiation. You cannot force people to say, oh, yeah, we know that the border is unsecure, but we're going to use it as a bargaining chip in some big old deal that has nothing to do with border security. So I think you're not only going to see the Congress as a whole withholding funds and playing hardball with the administration. I think you're also going to see an investigation and subsequent impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas for his negligence and his dereliction of duty as Homeland Security Secretary.
As sad as it makes me that we're going to have to take that step, it's the right step. And thank you for doing that. And thanks for your wonderful votes in Congress. Thanks for being with us. We don't have to tell you how to vote in this one because we know that you'll do the right thing. And we appreciate you always being there for CPAC.
Hey, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Congresswoman.